Hello everybody and thanks for joining me. Today I'm tying a spinner version of the little blue wing olive mayfly. The hook is a size 18 dry fly hook from Fulling Mill, and for the thread I'm using Uni Trico in 17/0, ever so fine but very strong for the size. To make the tail I'm using some olive fibbets, nice and springy, and then to make the body I'm stripping down some of this golden olive peacock eye and using that as herl to wrap the body. This is Tiemco Aero dry wing, which I'll be using to make the spinner wings, just a few fibres. And finally for the thorax, some superfine dry fly dubbing in blue wing olive green. So let's get started. I've cast on my thread just behind the hook eye, and there's one material I didn't mention that you'd need, but it's a little scrap of any thread you've got lying around. This is just some green uni thread, and I'm tying this in directly on top of the hook shank. And that's really important because we're going to use this to hold our tail fibres apart so they maintain a nice V shape and a big surface area. I've tied that down the length of the hook shank, and here I've taken my 2 fibbets and I'm tying them in at about 1.5 times the length of the body. Little pinch and loop to make sure they're tied down right at the end, and I'm just making some touching wraps forward, tying those in on top of the hook shank. I'll take that nearly all the way forwards, then come in with my scissors, snip away the excess, and then we can tie those down. This fly relies almost entirely on the surface tension of the water to float, so having a big spread out tail really helps to keep that surface tension and keep it floating. Here I've taken a really small pinch of my Aero dry wing, and this is a hollow fibred yarn, and I'm tying that in with a figure 8 wrap. I've realised I can't see what you're doing here, so I'm going to turn the camera a little bit. Just bring the thread behind, make some cross wraps, and do a few figure 8s to hold those out to the side. It's a really nice material for doing spinner wings, this. It's got a little bit of sparkle and a little bit of glister. It's a hollow yarn so it floats, and it provides a nice big surface area just to keep it sitting right in the film. The next material to tie in is my quill to make the body, and I've stripped down some of that peacock quill. I'm tying it in with the dark side pointing upwards, or at least I'm trying to. Things get a bit tricky when you're working around a camera on this scale. And just making some touching turns down the body, securing that all the way down to the base of the tail. I'm happy with the length, so now I'm going to take that little bit of thread that we parked earlier, and I'm going to manoeuvre it between those tail fibres, between the 2 fibbets, and draw it forward. And you can see that that's given me a really nice forked mayfly tail. And by having the thread in between, it's going to hold it forwards and make sure that they stay splayed out exactly where I want them. I'm going to secure all of that down and then trim away the excess thread, because the next thing to do is wrap the body. I've parked my thread just behind the wing, and again I'm working on a very small scale here, so I'm going to use my hands to wrap. I just find that having a hackle plier involved actually complicates things a bit more here. And I'm just trying to be careful not to trap down any fibres of the wing, making touching turns forwards, and just building up a little bit of a segmented body. I really doubt that the fish can see it on this scale. I think that the impression that the fly leaves on the water's surface is much more important than the colours, but it's a nice exercise and I think it looks pretty, so I'll keep tying them. I've taken that almost all the way up to the back of the wing. I'm going to make a couple of tight wraps over the top with my thread. You do have to be mindful of your thread tension when you're tying with these really, really fine threads. This 17/0 is so thin that you can actually sometimes barely see it, but you can put a surprising amount of pressure through so long as you're mindful that it is a really, really fine thread. Having secured down the peacock quill, I can trim away the excess. Don't throw that away, there's plenty there to make a larger fly. We've only used the very tip. Now I'm going to dub on a tiny little pinch, and I mean a really, really tiny pinch. Even this that I've put on here is probably a little bit too much. And just make a fine dubbing noodle that we can use to cross wrap over the thorax. I'm going to do a couple of figure 8 wraps to begin with, just to hold down those wings and build up a little bit of a bulky thorax, and then wrap forwards. You can see I'm panicking a little bit that I've got too much dubbing on here, so I'm just going to thin it out a little bit, pull out a few fibres, twist up what's left and make a little taper down towards the head. That's everything tied in, so the final job's going to be to whip finish, and again here, you just need to be mindful of the thread tension and how hard you're pulling. It's very easy to break off early. Double up the whip finish for security, come in with my scissors and trim away the excess. I'm going to position the fly so I can see the wings evenly, and I've spread them out a little bit. Coming in with my scissors, I'm going to make an angled cut just to represent the mayfly wing shape a little bit better, and match that up on the other side. You can see that they're going to sit really nicely in the surface film, give a nice big surface area, and it creates a little meniscus around the fly that I think is really what bends the light and lets the trout know that there's food there. Little overview of the finished fly. You can see that nice forked tail, the spread wings. It's a decent spinner pattern. Give it a go.